Quarterly, Lamentations, Song of Songs, Ecclesiastes. Lesson 12, Ecclesiastes 9, Enjoy the Day. Throughout the book, the preacher has repeatedly hammered home 2 points. First, there are good things in life to be enjoyed with thankfulness as a gift from God. And second, life is brief, uncertain, and outside our control, which makes our experience of this world frustrating. Both of these themes are laid out side by side in this chapter, with verses 1 through 10 focusing on the positive, and verses 11 through 18 on the negative. Interpreters sometimes so emphasize one of these themes as being the message of the book that they allow it to obscure the other. Either they stress the preacher's positive emphasis on seize the day, as if his negative message didn't really count, at least not for good Christians, or they so emphasize his negative message that he's presented as a cynic and an unbeliever, outside the bounds of biblical orthodoxy. But the message of the preacher is that we need to keep hold of both of these perspectives if we're going to live with wisdom in this world. In this, the preacher's thought resembles a graduate seminar more than a kindergarten class. In kindergarten, everything is presented in black and white terms, as simply as possible. But a graduate class introduces the full complexities of the subject and avoids reductionistic conclusion. A good class at that level leaves students with many more questions than they have answers. Becoming an expert in any topic makes you intensely aware of just how much you don't know. Well, in the same way, the preacher is more concerned to press us to wrestle with the complexities of the broken and cursed world in which we live than he is to give us simple answers to all our questions. The theme of not knowing links the 2 movements of the chapter, occurring in Ecclesiastes 9:1 and verse 12. In verse 1, the preacher observes that the righteous and the wise, as well of course as the wicked and the foolish, are in the hands of God, along with their works, the things that time and circumstances allow them to accomplish. Yet sometimes it's hard for us to discern from our circumstances whether God is for us or against us, whether he's orchestrating all things out of love for us or out of hatred. Job would be a good example. He served and followed God faithfully, yet he was so assaulted by Satan that he thought God was treating him like an enemy. Job 13:24. Job's circumstances did not prove that the world was out of the Lord's control, or that the Lord hated Job. Quite the contrary, as the frame narrative of Job 1-2 and 42:6-17 makes clear. God loved Job and held him up to Satan as a model believer. But that reality could not be simply read off Job's painful experiences, which were intended not for his judgment, but for his growth and his vindication. In the same way, Christians know by faith that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. However, if we're to judge by our circumstances, we might find it hard to reach the same conclusion. And the same is true for the wicked. The Lord has placed them in a slippery place that leads down to their destruction, even if they're outwardly prosperous and healthy, as Psalm 73 tells us. This world is not an easy place to interpret. See Ecclesiastes 8:16-17. As the hymn writer William Cooper put it, God moves in a mysterious way his wonders to perform. And Cooper's own experience of serious depression and mental illness brought him to see that clearly. The prime evidence that the same travails come to all of us, whether righteous or wicked, is of course death. Ecclesiastes 9 verses 2-3, which is mentioned or alluded to 9 times in verses 2-12. As Douglas O'Donnell puts it, morality is no protection against mortality. Sometimes theologians talk about common grace, the good things like sunshine and rain that come to all of us out of God's mercy, Matthew 5:45. But the preacher wants to remind us about God's common curse, the evil of death that comes on every human being, no matter how they themselves live. Ecclesiastes 9:3. This common curse is not unjust, since all the children of Adam, what the ESV calls children of man in verse 3, share their ancestors' propensity toward evil. As in the days of Noah, when every intention of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil continually, Genesis 6:5, so too in every generation, the hearts of Adam's children remain full of evil, Ecclesiastes 9:3. No one can complain that the evil of death is not fitting, to use the language of 3:11. We inherit this evil not just because Adam sinned, but because we all, like him, have gone astray, Romans 3:23. Yet death is undeniably evil, however challenging life may be. Death apparently leaves its occupants with nothing. No knowledge, no reward, no memory, no feelings, and no share in this world, verses 5 to 6. Given that reality, we should certainly try to enjoy the simple pleasures that life offers. Food and drink, festival clothing, celebratory anointing with oil, the joy of marriage and relationships, verses 7 through 9. Like children in the playground, don't stress over how long you have or what's going to happen next. Throw yourself into the life God has given you right now, such as it is, verse 10. For as the proverb says, a live dog is better than a dead lion, verse 4. That is, it's better to live a lesser life, that of a dog compared to that of a lion, than to be dead and have no life at all. This is one of the better known passages in Ecclesiastes, reminding us that things often don't work out the way we would expect. We anticipate that the fastest person will win the race, and the strongest army will win the battle, in verse 11. In the same way, it seems obvious that the wise should be blessed with food, and the intelligent with wealth, while the royal court should favor and advance people who have knowledge and insight. However, although these qualities are certainly advantages in life, they don't always garner the reward they deserve. Unforeseen events happen, turning our expectations upside down. In sports, of course, this is part of the excitement. If the underdog never won, there'd be no point in playing the game. But in real life, it's part of the frustrating nature of this world. In particular, death comes to us all, often at a time we least expect, no matter how wise or strong or fast we are. Like a fish caught in a net or a bird snared in a trap, we are snatched away in a moment. Verse 12. The preacher doesn't want to ruin your day with this thought. On the contrary, it should make us treasure each moment of life all the more, as he reminded us earlier in the chapter. If our life is fleeting, and we never know which day will be our last, it makes sense to live each day as if it were our last, instead of sleepwalking through our existence. See verses 7 through 10. Not only are events unpredictable, but people are fickle and changeable as well. The preacher illustrates this truth by way of a story about a besieged city, verse 14. If the battle were always the strong, then the city would have stood no chance, for the king besieging it was great and the city was small. But within that city there was a poor man whose wisdom saved it, verse 15. You would expect statues to be built in his honor, but he died forgotten, verse 15. Such is the nature of humanity, which quickly forgets those who should be remembered, and, we might add, often celebrates those who had better be forgotten. Yet the preacher draws the opposite conclusion from the one we might expect. If wise people who save cities are so swiftly forgotten, you might expect him to question the value of wisdom, but he doesn't do that. Wisdom is still better than might, as the story demonstrates, even if that wisdom is soon forgotten, verse 16. Quiet words of wisdom are better than the loud blustering of powerful fools, verse 17. Wisdom can provide deliverance against weapons of war, while even a little sin brings with it only destruction, verse 18. All these points need to be held together if we're going to live well in this confusing world. Wisdom is good, and sin is destructive, but don't expect the world around you to recognize and to reward that fact. Sometimes the wise are forgotten, and the strong are overwhelmed by their circumstances. And death, the ultimate enemy, comes to us all, wise and foolish alike. So enjoy the good things that God has given you while you can, and live with as much wisdom as you can, not because it's a certain way to prosperity, but because it is God's calling for you, as we will see in chapter 12, verse 13. Application questions. 1. What are some simple pleasures that you enjoy? Do you ever feel guilty about enjoying them? Should you? 2. What difference would it make to your life if you remembered the unpredictability of your future? 3. When might you need to remember the fickleness of all humans? 4. How does the gospel speak into these issues of an unpredictable future and fickle friends?